Great. So, great start. We got to hear from people in the creative industry about their perspectives on accessibility, disability inclusion. We talked when we first started the planning of this, is hearing from people who we think do this really well. And whenever you ask that question, you end up hearing about Channel 4, really, because Channel 4 has such a pedigree in terms of disability representation. And in particular, what it's known for is its work in the Paralympics. And that goes back a long way now, 2012, when we first saw some of the stuff that Channel 4 was putting together. We've also had Dom and others from Channel 4 have been part of panels that we've had at TechShare Pro before. And in particular, there's the Code of Portrayal of Disability, that there's a tool that Katie mentioned. So there are resources that Channel 4 is publishing to engage in and grow best practice. But what we wanted to do today was just hear the story of what happened over the summer. We've had an Olympic and Paralympic summer. We know that the work that happens through the Paralympics, it changes people's perspective about disability, I guess. It's a social change, just as much as it's a business or any other reason that we're thinking about. People's perspectives of disability shift. It changes how people see disabled people. And Channel 4 is part of that storytelling now. And it's interesting when you talk to people in the States about they haven't had a Paralympic moment. They don't really quite have that same perspective that we do in the UK, I think. And I'm thinking about my children being sort of 10 or 12 at the time of the Paralympics and growing up and seeing a difference in the two, the Olympics and the Paralympics, but they're both sporting events. They just happen to be, two different sets of sports activities. So, and I think that's actually part of what Channel 4 has helped to propagate and grow, is that sense of social perspective within the UK in particular, but clearly it has a global influence. So I think we're going to start by watching this year's ad. I'm checking, this is the first AV moment this morning, so I'm just checking. Yes, we are. So I guess I might need to dim the lights a little bit. I don't know whether that's possible. Just in case anybody can't see it. No? Okay. You're going to have to watch it on here. Off you go.
That stuff is delicious.
Wheelchair rugby Paralympian Aaron Fitz is sitting at home watching Bake Off when the furniture rises up and crashes against the ceiling. A shirtless man with a pint laughs in an armchair.
Gravity. It's totally self-centered.
Aaron hits the ceiling, then the floor in a wheelchair rugby match.
It wants to introduce your face to the floor, no matter who you are or what you look like. It breaks bones, hearts, and gives middle-aged men moves.
A driver with a mullet does donuts.
Friction doesn't care.
Sarah Story rides her bike.
It's not here to make exceptions.
She crashes.
You're going its way whether your lycra likes it or not. It's keeping your skin as a souvenir.
Sprinter Emmanuel Oyimbo Coca battles time in a 100-metre race.
Time doesn't stop for anyone. It just marches ruthlessly on. It says you're not going to qualify. You won't make the plane. Your pet's not coming back. You're not getting any younger.
A grandfather clock crashes to the floor. Other Paralympians battle the elements.
That force, that headwind, that 200-pound weight, that tennis ball headed straight for your face.
People watch the games.
He's incredible for someone like that.
He's so brave.
She's doing so well, considering.
Considering what?
None of them give a flying toss. Who you are or what your backstory is.
Good for her. For someone like that. For someone like that.
Aaron flips himself back into his wheelchair, intercepts a pass and scores triumphantly. The shirtless man angrily chucks his pint. A large egg timer is dumped in the stadium bin. Emmanuel reaches for the line, wins, and is hugged by his family.
They would never say he's amazing for someone in a wheelchair.
Gravity, friction, time, wind, heat, force. Sport doesn't care about disability. The Paris 2024 Paralympic Games on Channel 4.
So show of hands, who remembers that or has seen that or recognises it? I'd say about half the audience. James and Dom are going to tell us a bit about the story behind that. And the first thing that strikes you, of course, is incredibly challenging to watch because it's noisy and shouty and going at it. I mean, there's something there happening, isn't there? James, tell me about your role and how you describe that ad in the sense of your
Right. So I'm James Hamilton. I run planning for Creative as part of the marketing team there. To do the description thing, I'm dressed in the planner's uniform of stripy T-shirt, jacket, blue trousers, shaved head. I can't lay much claim to, or any claim to, what you actually saw, or the creative expression of what you saw on screen. But I did a lot of work on the strategy behind that. And Mark, as you referred to the sort of starting this summer, we need to go back almost 2 years before that for the planning of that campaign and where we really began. And it began with a piece of research that we looked at, talking to the general public about what motivated them to watch the Paralympics. And the single biggest motivating factor, around 60% of people picked this factor, was to watch disabled people overcome their disabilities. And when we presented that and we had a big away day, there was an audible gasp in the room of people sort of thinking, wow, that's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, nobody watches any other sport to see anybody overcome some other event in their life. People watch sport to watch people win, or because they support a particular team, or because for a sense of sort of national pride when it comes to the Olympics or the World Cup or whatever. And we worked very, very closely with Purple Goat on this, and with the disabled community, and with our own community, with For Purple as our own employee network, to really unpick and quickly understand quite how problematic that idea of overcoming was. And also to understand a little bit of our own, I suppose, culpability in creating that kind of narrative. Because if you think back to previous Paralympic campaigns, we had moments where we talked about people's backstories. We talked about what maybe had driven them to become a Paralympian, or the reason they had decided to focus on sport. And while that's a very motivating factor, and we knew did bring people through the door to watch the games themselves, at a certain point you have to say, well, we need to stop. We need to stop using that kind of easy win to bring people in, and start to think about a more authentic and honest portrayal of disabled sport. So what we wanted in that campaign was an ad that. And it's just you have to tread a very, very fine balance between sort of finger pointing at people and telling them that you're watching for the wrong reason, or that you have a patronizing view of disability, but at the same time challenging them to feel a little bit uncomfortable about their motivations for watching. And that was what really sort of sat behind the ad. We put a proposition, a thought, a brief into For Creative, which had a line in it about, say, we want people to feel like they're sitting slightly uncomfortably watching this ad, and to challenge their perceptions. And we worked very, very closely with Dom and his team to test that creative, to test the work that came back, to test the scripts, to make sure that not only was it delivering on that sort of sense of slight unease for a non-disabled audience, but that it was speaking authentically to that community.
Dom, do you want to shuffle forward slightly as well there?
Sure.
So it's right on the end there.
Hi everyone, I'm Dom, Global Client Director at Purple Goat. My visual description is I'm a tiny man in a slightly dirty wheelchair, always wear a hat, and I'm wearing a black jumper. Really nice to see you all. For those that don't know, Purple Goat, we are the world's first and only disability-led inclusive marketing agency, working with some of the biggest brands in the world to create the most progressive, forward-thinking ads and campaigns out there, really. It's been a privilege working with the Channel 4 team over the last couple of years on the ad. And I think that when we get asked, what's a brand doing it really well? And I think that for the sentiment we've heard this morning, we were being spoken to 2 years ago about this. And it just shows that you cannot create that ad unless you're speaking to the community along the journey. And I think you'd all probably agree with that. That's a spicy advert. And unless you've got the buy-in from the community, you're not going to feel comfortable to press the big green button and put in that live. And I think that that's testament to Channel 4 to have the confidence to do it, but then to bring the community, not just Purple Go, but other stakeholders as well along that journey. And I think, to James's point, we have this moment every 4 years where Channel 4 shows more coverage of disability. I think it was 1,000 hours of live stream coverage this Paralympics. In 2012, it was 177 hours of live coverage, which had never been done before. But so you've got this kind of captive audience to change a narrative about disability. In 2020, we obviously had, the Black Lives Matter movement that really challenged us all to think about our own preconceptions, assumptions, stereotypes about race and ethnicity. And it was a really important moment for us all in life. Have we yet had that moment around disability where we're actually sort of checking ourselves and challenging what we think? Maybe not. And I think to a very small extent, this campaign wants to tap into that and really not make people utterly uncomfortable, but go, well, actually, if you were fully comfortable with disability, if it was no different watching a disabled person to a non-disabled person on screen, would you be watching it to understand their backstories? Absolutely no, you wouldn't. So it's just tapping into that, trying to build confidence, but also and not trying to, I suppose, sort of say anything out of place, but also challenge people's ableist gaze that they look at the world through. And I mean, Shani mentioned earlier around 74% of the population that don't know what the social model of disability is, and that's from the disabled community themselves. And so actually, we know we're the most progressive voices in any room around disability. And so if you go to the general population, the disabled community themselves also need to be believing that actually they have parity. They have parity of existence, equity of existence. And again, this campaign hopes to start to have that conversation too.
That's a powerful thing you're trying to achieve there, in that. Was there a less spicy one that was more popular that you had to push through?
No, I don't. No, I suppose. No, there's not a less spicy one. But I'm always up for the spice.
I imagine you are, yeah.
No, the reality is the team did an amazing job, and absolutely, where we pitch it is the challenge. And so we worked with Channel 4. We did sort of a macro survey to really understand the collective barriers and the things that people wanted to talk about. But then we go and actually sort of drill down with prominent voices from the media and marketing world and the disabled community and go, right, based on these challenges that the broad community has said that they'd like to talk about more or like to unpick in Channel 4's coverage, what do you actually think of this creative? And obviously we've got the lens of us as Purple Goat as, I suppose, the filter in the middle, but then we go to the Joe Bloggs public as well to really sound test it as well.
And as a creative process, there's something you've worked on. What is it continuing? Is it a relationship you're building on? I don't know what, and that every 4 years thing is what I'm thinking. Yeah. What happens next to the sensors? So,
I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much I can say, but I'll say it anyway. It's not like it's a small room. But we are currently talking with the Channel 4 team about what you'd call the legacy of the games. We have this spike every four years, but that shouldn't be Channel 4's only sort of big venture into disability, and it isn't. We know they're doing great work all day, every day, but specifically, like we just heard from Katie, specifically around the representation of disability in advertising beyond Channel 4 programming, and what Channel 4 can do to actually continue to drive that so we get to a slightly more representative kind of approach from all brands and all agencies that they're working with.
Cool, thank you. So we've got two people on stage who are actually athletes, and we've been talking about how athletics and sports is represented. So I'm really interested to hear your perspectives on this stuff we're talking about. I'll start with you, Jodie. You were a commentator in the Paralympics this summer, amongst other things. But tell us a bit about who you are and what you're doing in terms of sport, and then also something maybe about this, what we're talking about. How is sport perceived in your mind in terms of disability and some of the things that you come across within the work that you do?
Well, my name's Jodie Ounsley. I've been a professional rugby player for the last 8 years for England Sevens and Exeter Chiefs. So all my life I've been in sport, but for me it's been a bit different because I've almost been in the hearing world, as we call it. So I've always seemed to be the person with the disability in an elite sports team with no one else with a disability. So it's been quite a sort of a strange one navigating my way through across the years. But one thing I've sort of noticed is just always being honest with my teams, my coaches, and, you know, just sort of opening their minds of what my disability is, what I struggle with and what I'm capable of and what I need, you know, a bit of support with. So I think that's been a challenge for myself and also challenging the people around me. And, you know, when I got the opportunity to go be part of the broadcasting team with Channel 4, completely new to me. I've always been used to being the athlete. So to go into that, I was very nervous. But I mean, the guys at Channel 4 were just amazing. It kind of shocked me how amazing they were just at adapting for individual people, you know, because all the people all across the broadcasting team had, you know, a disability. And they were just always checking how they can make it easier for us, how they can adapt and, you know, be successful in the job that we're being given. So in terms of what I was doing, it was flash interviews. So for a deaf person to go into a full, you know, track stadium, absolute noise, wearing earpieces, that's just impossible. But I was determined I'll try and make it work. And the team again was like, no, we'll try and make it work. So instead of having an earpiece, I had headphones. Instead of having the producers talking to me across, you know, through the earpiece, I'd have a producer stood next to me, next to the camera, giving me verbal cues and stuff. So it's just about adapting and little moments like that. And I managed to get the job done. And obviously, it was Zach who was competing, and hopefully managed to interview you all right and heard what you said. So, yeah, it's just all about adapting in my mind. And, you know, to see Channel 4 sort of break those barriers down, it's really refreshing to see.
And do you see it changing around you in other settings, that non-Channel 4, in other work you're doing? I don't know whether you're moving into other media or other roles, but is change happening? Are you positive about that around you?
Yeah, I definitely think change is happening. Obviously, aside from sport, I've been involved in BBC Gladiators, if anyone's watched that. But again, that was a completely different world for me. Going into TV and production, didn't have a clue what I was getting myself into. And again, they were just so supportive. Just even before I got into filming, everyone had deaf awareness courses, from like runners to cast to producers. And then during filming, they just made all tweaks. So like the lighting of the studio, different colour lights meant different things, numbers on the screens, hand signals. And a lot of it is in a noise arena with microphones. Again, deaf person, won't have a clue. So they were shouting cues of saying, Fury, do your pause now. And I'm stood there just like not knowing what's going on. So then they got the big sheets of paper and, you know, Fury, pause now, hold it up. And then I was like, you know, but it's just stuff like that. It's so simple, but just little changes like that. And it was so normalised. I think that's what made it so refreshing. I felt so welcome, and it wasn't like awkwardness or anything. I think 'cause I was just so natural with it, chatting to people, just like, all right, okay, we can talk about it and try and support where we can. So I think that's where it just boils down to, really, just having them chats.
Cool, thank you. Zach, please introduce yourself and tell us your role in the Paralympic team, because it's very impressive.
So my name's Zach. I am wearing black trousers, black turtleneck and a beige-coloured blazer. I am colourblind, so it's a good job I'm wearing mostly black. So I grew up with perfect vision. It was only when I was like 9 or 10 years old that my vision started to deteriorate. I have a rare eye condition called Stargardt disease, which affects my central vision. And like after the back of London 2012, I know we spoke about inspiring a generation, which was one of the mottos I think even Channel 4 were pushing out. And I was one of those people that was inspiring the generation to be inspired. And it's been, for me, quite a long journey, like I think 11, 12 years ago, off the back of London 2012, seeing people that I could resonate with on TV made me realise, like, oh, I have a disability, because at the time, I have 4 limbs, I don't look impaired. I never saw anyone on the screen to make me feel like I had a disability. So after London was really when I was like, okay, I want to see what I can do. And it's been a very, very long journey to be able to call myself a Paralympian. But in Paris this year, I was able to call myself a Paralympian and came out with 2 medals. I don't have them with because I don't know if it would have got through security. But yeah, and also on top of that, now I'm obviously venturing into the world of accessibility. So it's great to be here as well and combine the two industries.
But you didn't mention you were the team captain. That's the bit you meant to mention.
Not actually the Paralympics, the World Championships earlier this year. Yeah.
So you've reached the point where you're sort of involved. The reason I say that is because you're involved within the team as a sort of a relatively like representing the team. And I think that within the Paralympics over the summer, presumably you saw other things rather than just being a competitor. You were also involved in some of the machinery, and I know you saw some things that were great and some other things that could have been improved. So what was your experience in being in Paris, in the Games, with Channel 4 stuff wrapped around you? Where was the good stuff happening? What did people do well?
Yeah, I think what I'd say is, I think maybe 5 months before the Paralympics, Channel 4 were running VT sessions to like all the stuff that you see before the race. We obviously don't do that before the race. So we're running VT sessions, and I think the one takeaway I had with a few other athletes, which we spoke about, was the people behind the cameras had disabilities. The people interviewing us had disabilities. Not everyone, but people did. And it showed us that it was the best person for the role. It wasn't, we're ticking a box for having a disabled person. It was, this person's disabled. They're also the best person for this role. So I remember coming away from that Channel 4 day being like, there was a situation where we had to describe the universal relay, which if anyone's seen, it's carnage, but it's an amazing event. And we had to describe that event. And it was actually slightly embarrassing for me because the Channel 4 presenter who was interviewing me knew more about the rules than I did. I kept getting corrected. So yeah, I'd say for the most part, especially within the coverage, like we say, like off the back of 2012 to now, I'm hoping with Paris, the coverage we got, the time zone difference, how close it was to home, that we can inspire another generation, and in 10, 20 years' time, we'll have more kids with disabilities that are sharing even greater stories.
We were talking when we set the day up to be as positive as we can about the stories we're telling, but actually this weekend you appeared in the newspapers for a much less positive reason. And the reason I mention it is because that brand, Fortnum & Mason, clearly have got some clearing up to do about what they did. What was your perspective? Tell people who may not know what happened, and also your perspective on how it came together for you over the weekend. Yeah,
so if no one's checked BBC, ITV, Sky News, LBC, if no one's checked any of those news over the media over the weekend. So effectively, we were at Buckingham Palace last week, we got to meet the King, Princess Anne, amazing lady. And this was the Olympic and Paralympic medalists, which was such an amazing opportunity. I never even imagined I'd get to go to Buckingham Palace, let alone meet the King. And there was a few parts about the day that it just didn't sit right with me. One of those was the Olympians wore suits. The Paralympians were told to wear tracksuits, which we had from the Games. The second part of it was when I was arranging logistics to go down with some friends who are Olympians, because disabled people can be friends with people that aren't disabled. And we can also train with them. Until I got told, oh no, are you going to the after party? I was like, oh, what after party? So at this point, I'm scrambling through my emails. I'm like, how blind can I be to miss this invite? But yeah, turned out that the invite didn't stretch the Paralympic athletes. And yeah, the weird part for me is at first, I wasn't even shocked, surprised or angry. It was only after the event when I was going home and I was like, wait a minute, this is a bit weird. So I put a tweet out expecting maybe to get a couple of likes. Got nearly 2 million views. Been on the phone to every journalist under the sun. But I think it's just a sign where we have to voice what's right, because the feedback's been so positive from the public, and it's just showing me if we talk, we can make change.
Cool, thank you. So, that opportunity presented itself to wrap back around to this thing about brand and risk and reputation, just to for those of you who didn't join the dot there. Just go back finally to Channel 4. I think, sort of how conscious are you of your role in terms of leading the way in this way? Who do you look to in terms of where we can learn more from what you've learned over what you're doing within the...
incredibly conscious, and it is an incredible... responsibility, but also a unique privilege to have that role. And I think, I always, I feel uniquely unqualified to talk about this or to do this as a job. That's not to say I can't do it, but I do rely on having very, very strong trusted partnerships to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing. And so that we avoid those kind of, frankly awful situations where we're treating something differently. Because I think if you think back to the ad that we saw right at the start, the whole point of that was, obviously to challenge that narrative about overcoming disabilities as if that's something that you can actually do, but to just represent or demonstrate that the things that Paralympians are overcoming are the same things that any sports person is overcoming. The fundamental forces of nature in that campaign. But we will always push to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing, the most compelling thing, the most authentic thing, the most accessible thing. And as I say, it's a unique privilege to work on such an incredible brand as the Paralympics, if you think of the Paralympics as a brand, but also to have that kind of responsibility baked into our remit that we are, by design, representative of all of the diversity that makes up the UK.
I just wonder, sorry, as a final point there, I wonder whether those ingredients are what's made it possible for you to do it. But lots of other people watching in and thinking, well, my brand doesn't have that legacy or that history or that. How can you take the lessons and share them? Are there other connections that are made in industry and where can we come to learn more? The Code of Portrayal is an obvious place to look for help, but are there other resources that people can connect with?
Well, there's been a lot of sort of talk about the diversity and advertising work that we do. Right. We have an entire team that's devoted to working on this. I see people here today who you can reach out to. So right. Yeah, it is fundamentally, it's a part of our remit. It's something that sets us as unique as a brand in that it's not just words on a page that we have to adhere to. There is an act of Parliament that says we are supposed to behave in a particular way, and that is, as I say, it's a mantle which we wear with pride.
Cool, thank you. I'm sticking to my 1 minute rule. We've got 45 seconds left. Thank you very much, all of you. I think that when we were, again, thinking about how we plan the day, we wanted to hear how something that we think is great is done. And that's come through loud and clear. The investment of time, how long it's taken to reach that point when we see the ad on the TV. The same with the athletes and the way that they're investing their time and effort. That plays out in the way that you present the stories online and in person. Jodie, I love the fact that you talked about being on set, the practical adaptations that make it possible. That's just important for people to hear that this is all doable, and for you, it may be actually more strange than that they're holding up pieces of paper than they're sticking pieces of technology. And then Zach, although that was a bittersweet moment, it really does show that there still is a long way to go, but that there's all sorts of positive things happening. So thank you all very much for setting us up for the rest of the day. Thank you.